economically and morally, and he challenged readers to confront their own complicity, their own silence.
It's like he was dismantling all those narratives that slave owners used to justify their actions. He wasn't just telling his own story. He was giving a voice to the voiceless, humanizing enslaved people and demanding that their dignity be recognized.
Absolutely. And by writing his own narrative, he was asserting his...
Welcome to Witter, Who Has Time to Read? The podcast that brings deep dives for busy minds. Listen to AI hosts Jane and Dane and get ready to unpack the world's most captivating books in just a fraction of the time. Whether commuting, working out, or just squeezing in a quick break, we deliver key insights, thought-provoking themes, and takeaways you can carry into your day. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Plus, use our links in the description to purchase this book. Your support helps us bring more engaging book discussions to you. Listen and follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Who has time to read? You do, with Witter.
Welcome to Witter, everybody. Deep dives for those of us with maybe a few too many books on the nightstand.
Guilty as charged.
This month, we're really excited to continue our Black Voices series. And this one is powerful. Mm-hmm. Someone sent in Frederick Douglass's autobiography, Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave, written by himself.
Wow. I mean, talk about a title that just grabs you. Right?
Yeah, it really does. It's a firsthand account, unfiltered, life under slavery. I mean...
It is, but it's also so much more than just that, I think.
Okay, so for anyone tuning in for the first time, this book, it's not just a historical document, right? It's like this intensely personal story. Mm-hmm. Douglass takes us from his childhood on a plantation in Maryland.
Right.
All the way to his escape and his fight for freedom. But what really got me was how he exposes the insidious ways that slavery worked. Mm-hmm. How it just tried to crush, the human spirit.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. It's how he uses his own story, right? His individual story, to reveal the systemic brutality and the hypocrisy that defines slavery. It's not just, oh, woe is me. It's an indictment of the whole system.
It is. And he doesn't shy away from some really uncomfortable truths. Like, for example, when he describes being forbidden to learn, to read and write, like his owner, Hugh Auld, actually tells his wife that if Douglass learns to read, he'll be unmanageable.
Yeah, it's chilling. That knowledge was seen as this direct threat to the entire power structure of slavery. And Douglass himself even says the more Auld argued against his education, the more he understood the power of it.
Oh, wow. So it's like this twisted reverse psychology.
Yeah.
And the slave owners actually, without knowing it, setting Douglass on this path of resistance. Mm-hmm. Makes you think about how controlling access to information is still a tool of oppression, right?
Yeah.
Today.
Absolutely. And it's not just literacy. It's the whole control of narratives. Who gets to tell their story? Whose voices are silenced? These are questions that I think resonate really deeply with the Black experience throughout history.
They do. And, Douglass also tackles this complicated role of religion in slavery.
Yeah.
And he does not hold back.
Yeah.
When he's criticizing the hypocrisy that he witnessed among, white Christians.
Yeah. He talks about how his master, Thomas Auld, actually became crueler after he had this religious conversion.
Really?
It's a stark example of how religion was used to justify the horrors of slavery.
He even goes so far as to say, and I'm quoting here, "I assert most unhesitatingly that the religion of the South is a mere covering for the most horrid crimes."
That's a heavy accusation.
It's a huge accusation.
Yeah.
But it speaks to, this profound disconnect between faith and action.
It does.
It raises all these questions about how systems of power corrupt even the most well-intentioned beliefs, mm-hmm. and how those in power can manipulate faith, to serve their own interests. Again, it's a theme that sadly we see repeated throughout history. But even in the face of all of this hypocrisy, this brutality,
right,
Douglass never gives up hope.
Right.
He talks about the stolen moments of joy, those small acts of resistance, and this unwavering belief in his own humanity.
Yeah, and this is after witnessing just horrific violence, the murder of a slave named Demby by an overseer who, get this, believed in, quote, preemptive punishment.
Why?
I know, right? It's not about keeping order. It's about instilling terror. It's about reminding the enslaved people that they have absolutely no rights, no agency.
Wow. And yet, Douglass still finds a way to cultivate his own inner strength. He describes learning to write using whatever scraps he could find, like fences, pavements. He even called them his copybook. He even risked everything to organize a Sabbath school for his fellow slaves, to teach them how to read. until it was, violently shut down.
Yeah, his resilience is extraordinary. He understood that knowledge is power, and he wanted to share that with others. This idea of self-reliance is something that we see over and over again in the Black experience.
It is. And, it's a theme that speaks to the power of community, of this shared struggle and this unyielding spirit of resistance.
It really does. It's that spirit, that unyielding spirit that ultimately leads Douglass to freedom. He makes a couple attempts to escape, and each one is just like this testament to his courage, his determination.
And his escape isn't just about physical freedom, though, is it? It's about reclaiming his narratives, his right to, self-determination.
Exactly. But even in the quote-unquote free North, Douglass encounters discrimination, prejudice. It's a reminder that legal freedom doesn't automatically equal social or economic equality.
Yeah. Harsh reality check. I bet that was disillusioning for him.
Yeah.
But he still doesn't let it silence him.
Right. Nope. He starts attending abolitionist meetings, immerses himself in the movement, starts reading The Liberator, William Lloyd Garrison's anti-slavery newspaper, and, begins to really find his voice within this community.
So that voice really takes center stage at this anti-slavery convention in Nantucket in 1841. What do you think that must have felt like for him, standing up and sharing his story like that so publicly?
Oh, incredibly courageous. Remember, fugitive slaves were still at risk of being captured and returned to the South. Sharing his story, with all the details, could have put him in immense danger.
I mean, it's almost unimaginable, but he must recognize, the power of his story, right? How it could galvanize the movement, personalize those horrors of slavery for people who had never seen it firsthand.
His voice, coming from his lived experience, it just resonated with audiences, He brought this raw authenticity to the movement, challenging those stereotypes, those dehumanizing stereotypes that we're used to justify slavery.
Yeah. So this is also where his writing takes, a significant turn, too. His autobiography, which comes out in 1845, it becomes a sensation. What do you think made it so impactful for readers at the time?
It wasn't just a personal story, right? It was this searing indictment of the whole institution of slavery. Douglass exposed the hypocrisy, the brutality. He was like, look, this whole thing is bankrupt economically and morally, and he challenged readers to confront their own complicity, their own silence.
It's like he was dismantling all those narratives that slave owners used to justify their actions. He wasn't just telling his own story. He was giving a voice to the voiceless, humanizing enslaved people and demanding that their dignity be recognized.
Absolutely. And by writing his own narrative, he was asserting his agency. Like, you didn't break me. I'm not defined by this institution that tried to dehumanize me. He took control of his story and used it as this, weapon against oppression.
I love that. This whole theme of reclaiming one's narrative, fighting for self-determination, it resonates, so strongly with expression of the Black experience. It makes you think about whose stories are being told, whose voices are amplified, and whose are being silenced still.
Absolutely. Douglass's narrative was groundbreaking then, and it still challenges us to think critically about how we understand, how we grapple with, the legacy of slavery and its impact on society today.
We were just talking about how Douglass reclaims his narrative by writing his autobiography, but there's this one thing that always gets me.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
It's how he's deliberately vague about his actual escape.
Yeah, I know what you mean, you're kind of left hanging, right? You want all the juicy detail.
Totally. Spill the tea, Frederick.
But there's a reason he does that, a really powerful reason.
Okay, I'm all ears.
He actually explains it in the book.
Yeah.
He says he can't reveal the specifics because he needs to protect the Underground Railroad and everyone who's still enslaved.
Oh. That makes sense. He didn't want to compromise the whole network, right?
The
safe houses, the escape routes, all the things that helped him and countless others get to freedom.
Exactly. And, if he revealed his methods, it could give slave owners intel, to prevent future escapes.
Yeah, it's strategic. It's like putting the collective fight above his own personal story.
Right. It shows how well he understood the power dynamics, what was really at stake.
He was thinking long game, big picture.
His silence becomes this form of resistance, a way to safeguard the movement, and everyone's still fighting for liberation.
Wow. Makes you think about the weight of that choice,
Right.
The responsibility he felt to protect others.
Definitely. And even though he doesn't give us the specifics, the emotion is still there, right? The tension, the fear, but also the hope. It all comes through in his writing.
Yeah, you can feel the weight of every decision, every step he takes.
He even says he felt like one who had escaped a den of hungry lions when he finally reached New York.
Wow, powerful image, right? Captures that intensity. And it really highlights the risks he was willing to take for his freedom.
And for the freedom of others.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Douglass's narrative, what are some of the big takeaways for our listeners?
Well, it's a story that I think goes beyond its time. It reminds us of the human cost of oppression, but also the resilience of the human spirit and how powerful just one voice can be in challenging injustice.
It's true. And it makes us think about whose stories get told, how they're told, and the responsibility we all have to engage with those narratives, especially the ones that have been marginalized or silenced.
For sure. Douglass's narrative was a call to action then, and it's still a call to action for us today, challenging us to confront the legacies of slavery and racism that are still so present and to work towards a more just and equitable world.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, we want to encourage all of you listening to seek out more stories by Black authors past and present.
Yes, their voices, they enrich our understanding of history, of society, the human experience in such profound ways.
They do. So thank you all for joining us for this Black Voices Deep Dive. And remember, even if you don't have time to read the whole book, we've got you covered right here on Twitter.